Hi, this is Josh Marshall from TPMtv. It's Tuesday, October 16th, 2007. One of the best ways to evaluate what a presidential candidate will do if and when he becomes president is to look at who their advisors are. What they say on the campaign trail, you don't know if that really means anything, but who they're getting advice from often turns out to be a pretty big deal. Back in 2000, this was definitely the case with George W. Bush. People thought he was going to be a lot like his father in foreign policy, but the key, if you looked, was looking at who his advisors were. A lot of neoconservatives who ended up having a dominant role in the foreign policy he pursued over the next 7 years. Now, if you look at the people who are advising Rudy Giuliani, it turns out that they seem to be all the people who were either too insane or too extremist to even get on the George W. Bush team. So let's run down a list of a few of the highlights. First, you have Norman Podhoretz, well known as the godfather of neoconservatism. Podhoretz thinks that 9/11 was the beginning of World War IV, U.S. versus Islamofascism, and in fact, he's now publicly saying that America has to go to war with Iran. Podhoretz had a secret meeting with George W. Bush and Karl Rove at the end of last month where he begged the president to get on with it, go ahead and attack Iran. Here's a few examples of things that Podhoretz has said recently about the absolute positive necessity of going to war with Iran as soon as possible.
There's no way that anything other than military action can work to prevent Iran from developing a nuclear weapons capability. There is no alternative to military action. Nothing else will stop them. Not negotiations, not sanctions. There won't be an internal insurrection, at least in time. There's no way of stopping them short of military action. I think this is a reality that many people are trying to evade.
Now, next up we have Daniel Pipes, who has a long and distinguished career of advocating war against basically every Arab and Muslim country in the world. He's not even crazy about most American Muslims. Pipes says that there's no escaping the unfortunate fact that Muslim government employees in law enforcement, the military, and the diplomatic corps need to be watched for connections to terrorism, as do Muslim chaplains in prisons and the armed forces. Pipes also doesn't screw around when it comes to the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians. Pipes says that when a suicide bomber comes from a Palestinian village and detonates himself in Israel, his entire village should be destroyed. Now, a couple of years ago, George W. Bush appointed Pipes to the U.S. Peace Institute. Now, this caused a lot of controversy, and he eventually wasn't even able to get through the Senate, which was then controlled by Republicans. When asked about his opponents, the people who were trying to block his nomination, here's what Pipes said: "My nomination is merely a stepping stone in their assertion of power to achieve a militant Islamic state. To put it more graphically, the substitution of the Constitution for the Quran." So that's Daniel Pipes. Now, just last week, Rudy appointed some new foreign policy advisors to his team. Now, first up on our list is Thomas Joscelyn, his new terrorism advisor. Now, Joscelyn is very up to date with the most current and accurate information about terrorism, which includes the ties between Al-Qaeda and Saddam in the lead up to 9/11, and now the way that Iran is apparently one of the major backers of Al-Qaeda. Last but not least, we have Michael Rubin. He's Giuliani's new Iran advisor. Now, I've actually met Rubin a number of times, and let's run through some of his greatest moments during the Bush administration. Michael Rubin, key supporter of Ahmad Chalabi, a well-known liar, fabricator about weapons of mass destruction, and allegedly spy on behalf of Iran. Now, anybody remember Doug Fife's Office of Special Plans, the office set up in the Pentagon to come up with bogus evidence of ties between Al-Qaeda and Saddam, weapons of mass destruction, and completely unrealistic plans about what would happen in Iraq after we blew the place up. So Rubin signed on at the Office of Special Plans in the fall of 2002 and stayed on through the invasion. Next, he went to Iraq, where he served as the back-channel source of intelligence on the situation in Iraq for then Deputy Secretary of Defense and now disgraced former Deputy Secretary of Defense Paul Wolfowitz. According to a February 2004 article in the National Review, Rubin could be found in Iraq analyzing Pepsi cans to see evidence of Iranian subversion and influence. Now, of course, Giuliani does not have Michael Rubin advising him about Iraq. He has him advising him about Iran. So just to be fair, what does Rubin have to say about Iran? Well, apparently back as far as 2003, when he was in the government, he wrote up a presidential directive for President Bush to sign, authorizing the U.S. to overthrow the government in Iran. So presumably, when Rubin and Podhoretz get together and try to decide whether we should go to war with Iran on the day Giuliani is inaugurated or the week after Giuliani is inaugurated, they're probably not going to have too much to argue about, and they'll probably come up with a plan pretty quickly. So what does it all mean? Basically, Rudy Giuliani, when it comes to foreign policy, seems to be about as dumb as a rock. In fact, when you consider that most rocks, at least outside of the major metropolitan areas, don't think they're incredibly well versed in foreign policy, he's probably a lot stupider than your average rock. But he does have a lot of wingnut neoconservative advisors who are telling him that we absolutely have to go to war with Iran, and if we do, that everything will be great for the United States. I'm Josh Marshall, TPM Media, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.